allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Everyone have to sing that
Up next, we have public announcements. We have a proclamation for Relationship Violence Awareness Month.
Whereas the effects of relationship violence cross all social and economic lines affecting women, men, children, and society as a whole, and whereas the crimes of partner and family member assault violate an individual's dignity, security, and humanity through the systemic use of physical, emotional, sexual, psychological, and economic control and abuse, and whereas Missoula community members can get involved in reducing or preventing relationship violence in our community by supporting programs that provide safety, healing, and help for survivors of relationship violence, by holding offenders accountable for their behavior, by pledging to never commit, condone, or remain silent about relationship violence, and by honoring healthy relationships and families by striving to achieve a nonviolent and healthy community. Now therefore we, John Ingham, the Mayor of the City of Missoula, and the Missoula Board of County Commissioners do jointly proclaim October 2015 as Relationship Violence Awareness Month, and urge all citizens to actively participate in the scheduled activities and programs sponsored by the Missoula Family Violence Council, the Missoula YWCA, University of Montana Student Advocacy Resource Center, and the Missoula City-County Relationship Violence Services, including the Crime Victim Advocate Program, Just Response, and the Healthy Relationships Project to work toward the elimination of relationship violence, as signed by the Mayor and the Commissioners.
Thank you, Commissioner Curtis. Are there any other public announcements? All right, moving on to public comment on items not on today's agenda. Are there any public comments on items not on today's agenda? Could you state your name for the record?
Members of the County Board of Commission, this is an opportunity for I, Willis Curdy, living at 11280 Corn Ranch Road, say a few things about one of the issues that have been affecting members of the Big Flat community. Pat has kind of anticipated everything here, so I want to take a few minutes to discuss an issue with access that is currently ongoing in the Big Flat area. As you can see by the map here, and I'm going to walk over there if that's
Can I take the mic? No,
okay.
it comes off.
Currently, Big Flat Road, as you can see, joins with Corn Ranch Road at this intersection here and continues on here to the west. Years ago, access was established, and when we're talking about years ago, we're talking 40, some 50 years ago. From this point right here, where Big Flat Road makes the 90-degree turn. This land here in this color is Plum Creek land, and an access point has been used up through what's called Martin Gulch, all the way back into this area that was at one time privately owned land. This was a part of the Muir Logging Company land years ago and was transferred to the U.S. Forest Service in a land exchange. Currently, there's some ongoing work by Plum Creek in an effort to sell property in this area. And there's concern among a number of landowners in the area and recreationists who feel that access to this point, at this point, is going to be closed. So, in just giving a quick synopsis, this is basically the issue at hand, is this point right here. Now, a bigger issue I'll get to in a little bit with all my discussion, which goes all the way from this point right here at Martin Gulch, clear over to Tank Creek, due south of the Hughsong area. Oh, by the way, for the record, I am also a representative of the House District 98.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So So is that access now a road or a trail?
Well, there's still a trail in there, but Plum Creek has built a road starting this point right here along this property line, within 50 feet of the property line for the most part, and has built switchbacks back in here to access property, its property back in this area here also. Okay, and I'll make a response to the road also. In the 33 years that my wife Gloria and I have lived in the Big Flat area, we have consistently used this area, this trail, to access both private and public land, especially the public land, in the Martin-Sherman Creek area. We've used it for horse use. I've used it for hunting with my kids and other family outings. Access concerns occur for the entire Plum Creek holdings along the South Side Road for Martin Gulch to Tank Creek and Corral Creeks across from Huson. Unfortunately, this land was not included in the Montana Legacy Project sponsored by Senator Baucus a few years ago. This area and an area just to the west of Lowell has been a source of concern about what is going to happen to those lands. In the recent years, Plum Creek has begun to earnestly sell off their lands, and as a result, access points to public lands have either been closed off or the possibility exists that current access will be eliminated. And those access points that have been traditionally used are Sherman Martin Road,
There it is. It's back.
okay, Dry Gulch Road, Deep Creek Road, and further to the south, to the west, has been Albert Creek and Rock Creek. Those lands, there's parcels of land, private land in here that are not Plum Creek land, and parcels that Plum Creek has sold. Altogether, this entire area covers 22,000 acres, or approximately 22,000 acres. So anyway, Plum Creek has sold off sections here, and as maybe some other folks will mention later, is that access points to public land back in this area have been closed as a result of locked gates at those private property lines. Access to our public lands is one of the prime selling points for our community. Current public land access points in the Missoula Valley now face very heavy use. The Rattlesnake, Patty Canyon, and Blue Mountain are the primary access points near Missoula. With a growing population, Missoula needs to keep its options open to further access points. Missoula County should work with Plum Creek, other private landowners, land and wildlife conservation groups, and the U.S. Forest Service in keeping access open to public lands within the 22,000 acres of current and former Plum Creek lands. Missoula County can establish a legacy for generations to come by working to keep access open on the south side of the Clark Fork River. Now, in a related issue besides access, development in this area has some potential problems. One is that settlement or development in this area expands urban interface, wildland-urban interface issues. More developments means that firefighters will be asked to work in an environment in which greatly enhance the risk of firefighter safety. Now, as a 38-year wildland firefighter, I understand this very carefully and consistently. Development in wildland-urban interface areas are a tremendous threat to wildland firefighter safety. And with more development in these areas, there's more pressure to protect private property and, of course, putting our firefighters at greater risk. This area also is winter range for a substantial deer and elk population. Development will result in more human-wildlife conflicts and loss of browse and and feed for these large ungulates. As one who has hunted in this area for years, I see Plum Creek plans as a serious threat to a viable large game population. Recently, as I mentioned earlier, Plum Creek has built a road from Big Flat Road in the Sherman area and a switchback to connect with other spur roads higher up on the ridge. Plum Creek's road in the Martin Gulch area is very problematic in terms of the quality of its construction. Plum Creek's low-cost construction procedures could easily lead to legal action over dust control and loss of property values due to degradation of private property during spring runoff. And if you have an opportunity to go out there, or some of the planning group can go out there, you can see that this road, I think personally, is pretty steep. The soils in this area are not conducive for a road, and that kind of road in this area. Plum Creek contends it just has to use native materials in the road, and as a result, during spring runoff, there can be a substantial amount of water flowing down Martin Gulch. Martin Gulch is an ephemeral stream, meaning that it just flows at certain times of the year. Further on up Martin Gulch, it is a permanent stream, but at this point is basically an ephemeral stream. Plum Creek has put an 18-inch culvert into their new road. With debris flow from runoff, that culvert cannot handle the water that potentially can come down that gulch. Okay. On top of that, the material that's used, the native construction materials, are highly erodible, and as a result could easily end up on private property just to the north of that newly constructed road. So there are serious issues as far as public land or private land degradation at this point. So in conclusion, I encourage the Missoula County Commissioners to work with Plum Creek, other landowners, wildlife conservation groups, neighbors, in their plans for this area, while remembering that about the outdoor recreational opportunities for Missoulians, Montanans, and from our out-of-state visitors. And one last thing I'd like to mention is that this trail right here gets thousands of visitors each year, and the neighbors can attest to that. So it's not just sporadically used access into public land. And thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment?
I'm Greg Munther, 40-year resident of Missoula County. I represented Montana backcountry hunters and anglers. I was also the district ranger for the Forest Service at 9 Mile, which encompassed some of the land bordering this area. So I recognize long that interface is delicate balance between Plum Creek lands and already public lands, national forest lands. And over the years, Plum Creek was a good neighbor in a lot of respects in that they did allow public access onto their lands and use of their lands, and that is rapidly threatened to change. And these patterns of use that are kind of traditional, I think, in Missoula County are threatened by this type of change in ownership. I also personally have used this access point. I actually have 3 llamas that I try to get in shape every spring, and that's where I go because I increasingly put more and more sandbags in them as we go up the mountain and they get in better shape. But they knew they were just carrying sandbags and they lay down on me, but they don't know any different, so they keep packing the sandbags up. But I just want to speak on behalf of hunters and anglers in particular, but all Missoula County residents who use this area. It has become part of their lifestyle, particularly in the Big Flat area, the people that access those mountains from that particular area. And I just urge that the county look for solutions that might retain that public access in that part of the country. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Brian Huckabee, and I'm actually a landholder in the area, and well, this will be my 13th winter in Section 8, so let me point this out. Section 8, right here. I became aware of the area by hunting. I hunted in the area on Plum Creek's land and started using it. And then soon after became familiar enough to know that there was land for sale. And luckily I was able to buy a majority of the original homestead piece there of the Gilman Creek Ranch. Homesteaded in the late 1800s or 1900s by the Gilman family. The county does have an interest in that. They have approximately about a 500-acre conservation easement. Some of you may recollect that it was in the paper not too long ago. It's supposed to be transferred into Five Valleys Land Trust at some point. I'd like to see that happen. Just due west of that and to the south, which you can't see in the section on this map, the Ammons, Doug Ammons, has a 500-acre easement with Five Valleys Land Trust, all accessed at the end of Creek Road. I've been working with the Elk Foundation, Five Valleys Land Trust, every agency, Nature Conservancy, trying to gain interest in this for quite some time. And it wasn't until this recent change in the Martin Gulch area that Willis mentioned that we actually started getting some momentum. As a private landholder in the middle of the back end of the Plum Creek lands, I'm abutted up against the Forest Service. And due to corner crossing laws, myself and my family and all the landowners in that area stand to lose access as well. Should Plum Creek sell Section 17, 9, 5, and then the other one due west of 8. I just think it's a valuable asset to the community. I know about all the issues. The county provides support and road maintenance to the end of Section 8, primarily because of the Deep Creek Shooting Range in Section 34, and then probably goes back longer than I know, but the previous owner that bought the original homestead, Gary Gallagher, may have had an influence on that at one time in its history. The biggest problem I see here is that Plum Creek is in a situation where they can sell off individual pieces. They tried to do this for many years as the whole section. We're talking $20 million for 20,000 acres in this area. But that wasn't very successful, except up at the north end, up where Willis mentioned on Tank Creek and Corral Creek, where an out-of-state family is added to a 500-acre ranch and now currently holds between 3,000 and 4,000 acres, all of which have cut off public access. Not just new public access, but public access that multi-generations of families have been using for 30, 40, 50 years or more. And so that's happening at that end. At the other end, in the Martin Gulch thing, we have what we're here to discuss today. I just think that it's, like Willis said, like Greg Munther said, it's an important thing. Missoula's growing. It's growing to the west. This is the most direct, logical access for anybody besides driving north or coming back into town for access to National Forest Service lands and to start thinking about how much of an impact it has, because having lived up there for 13 years, I'm pretty familiar what it entails. And for instance, just think of this perspective. There's some withholdings of Plum Creek that are at the end of the Dry Gulch Road that you don't even see on this map, that you would travel 15 to 20 miles behind a lock-gated road. And those pieces are for sale. They have sold. One of them is sold already, and so someone has their own private access to drive in, to an otherwise gated area that's only been accessed for logging for the last 20, 30 years. And so it's going to fragment and break up this wild space, disrupt the habitat, create more issues for the county. It's not any different than any of the other situations that have been faced in Sealy Lake. And if you look at this, this is not much different than Patty Canyon, the Rattlesnake Creek. I mean, heck, there's people that still remember riding their dirt bike to all the lakes up in the Rattlesnake Creek drainage. And so I just urge the commissioners to take a stance. Think about the investment they have in the conservation easement, there on our property, think about what, how they're going to shape this for the future of the Missoula residents.
Sorry, Commissioners, Marta Purepoint for the record. I'm here today as a citizen to discuss the same property. For the sake of reference, I'll just call it Martin Gulch. Honestly, it's been difficult to obtain information about the property, but as I understand the situation, the 160 acres currently being held by Plum Creek that we've been discussing is under contract to be sold. Before I move into some practical concerns about the property, I want to express my personal gratitude for the joy and serenity I have personally experienced hiking on the land for over a decade. I also want to point out that during that decade that I have enjoyed the land, I've met many other users, some of them here today, some of us just in passing. It may be the first time we recognize each other in our grown-up clothes. I've met other hikers, horseback riders, hunters, and bikers, and all of us have respected each other and the land. I am proud that unlike other nearby areas, this land has been used gently and respectfully. During hunting season, I personally follow unspoken rules out of respect for hunters by hiking only during midday, wearing orange, sticking to logging roads where wildlife is rarely, if ever, seen. I pull my dogs aside when we see horses. I never leave trash behind, and neither does anyone else. There are no beer cans and pop bottles in this area. I have personally removed knapweed and watched others do the same on this land. We don't just use the land, we care for it, and we care for each other. And we're all of us here to express our love of this land and to determine if there's anything we can do to retain this limited public access to the Plum Creek property behind the 160 acres, which then leads to United States Forest Service. While Plum Creek may have the right to sell this 160 acres, I respectfully urge the county and Plum Creek to work with interested parties to retain some Forest Service, some form of access to the Forest Service land, which we as citizens and taxpayers have the right to enjoy. Do not end access at all time from this point. We really, really do care for this land. And I think access is so important, as we've discussed how much of it's been limited over the years. There's another point that I would like to make. You know, I've made many phone calls about this property to many different agencies. And as I said before, it's been difficult to obtain information. And I do think that in 1969, the Planning Commission took over some zoning responsibility for this property. And it's been unfortunate that when I've tried to call the county planning, I haven't been able to get any answers to the questions of what is allowed to happen up there and who is responsible for permitting and what kinds of construction can take place with the present zoning. And so I'm here to ask really for two things. You know, one is that you consider working with others to retain the open access through the land. And the second is that to the extent that you have authority over this land and jurisdiction over this land and some obligation toward this land, that you exercise that and that you begin to take interest in what's happening up there, because I do think that that rests with you and some other local agencies. And as a citizen, I've been sent from agency to agency to agency, and the responsibility has to end somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Ron Vanderveen. I own 2 pieces of property that border the southern part of the parcel in question. These people are all correct. It has been used, and it's been treated well. What's going on there, I'm afraid, is a future subdivision. There are 2 sections of property. The first 2 sections are going to be divided into approximately 4 160-acre lots. I don't know why the road is there, because the property is accessible from the backside. This is merely a shortcut. These people have taken care of that property, as I have. There are some dust issues, and there's certainly going to be hydrological issues that have already affected us and other people that own property near me. Please, help us to resolve this. I'm a respectful property owner of Plum Creek, but why should few benefit when so many are going to lose? Thank you.
Is there any other public comment on items not on today's agenda?
Patricia Kelly. I'm also a resident of the area. I don't have much to add to what everyone said, other than we do have some questions about the permitting process. The lower part of the stream in Martin Gulch, it is true, does not run all year, but the upper part does. In fact, it's running now. As far as I understand it, the definition of a perennial stream is one that runs all year round in any part in a normal rainfall year. This has been a very dry year. The upper part is still running. So as far as I understand it, that would make that part of the stream subject to the Montana Natural Streambed and Land Preservation Act, and a permit would be required from our local conservation district. We've attempted to find out if that permit has been issued, but we haven't been able to do that. There are also some questions that it may be subject to a permit from the Army Corps of Engineers. So we have people working on that right now, but one question for you or the planning district or whomever would be, are the required permits available and have they been issued? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other comment?
This is Greg Gunther again. I hate to come back up a second time, but I did want to tell you that I talked to the city open space woman, Elizabeth, whatever her name is, Elizabeth Erickson. And I talked to her because apparently in the open space, giving up the open space responsibilities in the county, that particular area does fall within the county open space allocation to deal with that. However, you know, I explained to her the parcel and we talked about it on the map over the phone, and she said, I can't imagine the city actually managing a place like that. It just didn't, you know, it doesn't fit into a park kind of environment. So I don't know how that gyrates with the open space planning effort, but I just wanted to comment that I have talked to her and she didn't think the city would probably be too interested in pursuing it because you couldn't envision a city type of land from administration standpoint. So that's all I have to add. Thank you.
Thank you.
Might have to be again another comment to add. Just as Greg mentioned, a lot of us have talked to different members of different agencies, and there has been discussion from the legacy aspect in the Nature Conservancy that there could be funds interested. Mike Mueller from the Rocky Elk Foundation has also, said that the Elk Foundation is interested in private access or buying up private access or easements to give people to National Forest Service lands for hunting. Section 13, Core Section 7 on Martin Gulch qualifies for that, but this is a big project. It's not something that just one agency alone can tackle. It needs someone to take leadership. And since this is in the county and it has to go through the county permitting process, I think the county should step forward and look at this strategically and say, no, we want to shape the way that our lands are developed. All of this land here is marginal for homes. It's very steep. Martin Gulch happens to be one of the steepest in the whole entire area of discussion. I mean, I personally avoid walking most of the hillsides in there because they're pretty vertical. And Greg mentioned that's why it takes as long as up there. I mean, they get some elevation real quick. In Section 8, coming from my perspective, I live on the flats. There's a flat section and a meadow in the middle. We recently had a new house put in up on the hill. It got permitted. I mean, it's not defendable. I doubt if it's been annexed into the rural county fire department yet. I don't even know. Maybe they won't, insurance is a whole other issue, I would think. The land is so marginal and so steep, they even had to squeeze their septic system in. Well, guess what? They squeezed it onto my property. Thank goodness that we have block regulations to defend my rights there, and I was able to get it moved right away. But I mean, it was like, oh, we don't have room, we'll make room. And that's what I was told. We're making room at my expense, cut down my trees, push it over. I mean, that's what's gonna happen in these sections. I mean, they're not maybe one house on the top of a mountaintop for a McMansion, but, you know, I mean, to divide this thing up and split it and a lot of people put their houses on the hill, in the slope, it's a real challenge for the infrastructure needs. And so, I just want to say that there's other agencies interested. Someone needs to take the leadership and enforce what we believe is the right here as far as development in Missoula County.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Vanderveen. I'm the other half of the gentleman from 3125 Big Flat Road. This road that was put in by Plum Creek is adjacent to our property, and I just wanted to note that aside from the big picture of accessing property that is like medicine to all of us, as a property owner next to property that is under private ownership that has no answer to anyone on how it's developed, what goes in, how it goes in. There's no permitting agency that we could find that gives an oversight to what's really happening. I'm concerned because the real estate agency that represented them told me one thing about distances from property boundaries and what was going to happen, as did the project manager who put the road in. And then they did turn around and did something completely different and said they didn't come under the guise of the regulation of the zoning. That kind of made my hair stand on end, thinking about the other parcels that were going to be sold, as well as this one, that private owner is being told, well, you can do an occasional sale, and oh yeah, this can go to your daughter. And you start counting the number of cars that might be on the road and the number of people up there, and oh my gosh, who gets to say what goes where, and is it going to be right? Is it going to not harm other properties? Is it? So, in a nutshell, who's looking over their shoulder and who do they get to answer to? Right now it appears to be no one.
Thank you.
I'll keep it brief. It's the same thing. I really appreciate, well,
My name's Forrest Gue. I've lived over on Snowdrift Lane, which is a mile and a half from here, for 36 years. For 35 years, I've taken horses up there, bicycles. My sons have camped back there. They're both 30 years old now, but I raised them back there. They were able to camp. And we've had access for the last 36 years. I was totally shocked when I went back there 2 weeks ago and saw what was going on. And I feel very sorry for the Vanderveens. If you were blindsided, yeah, I had a feeling they were blindsided. If my house would have been next to what I saw and I hiked the road that's been called a shortcut here, it did look like a shortcut to me. Very, very poorly designed road. And if we let this continue, it's going to be a huge loss for the people of Missoula. And I have a lot of friends and a lot of people, some of these folks I've seen up there, but when you leave that trailhead there, you can go back there and there can be 4 cars parked down there with people you won't see back there again. That's how big the area that this is accessed for. So it's a wonderful place to go compared to Blue Mountain, which is getting very crowded. That, you know, there's so many few places for access. If we have some time, I think this meeting took place. I found out about it yesterday, made sure I was able to come. I've got a lot of friends that would like to show their support of what everybody else has said here. That's all I got to say. I just hope we don't lose that access. And also the development back there should be done properly.
Thank you. And I just want to be clear that this is not a public hearing, so
Okay.
we didn't have it as an agenda item, so it's not that we're trying to keep people from sharing.
Oh, I
with us.
didn't think so.
We didn't know. We saw on Facebook that this was a topic of interest. So, but if there are unresolved issues or anything, we certainly can schedule something so that more public can have input if needed.
well, it's just little notice like it is, and what, you know, this and the shock that we're all in.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good show of support here, and I don't see anybody against what the rest of us are saying. If they are, I'd like to hear what the negative parts are, the other side.
Pat, could you possibly address some of the questions that were brought up? I made a note of a couple of them, but I suspect that we all kind of took note of many of the issues that were brought up, such as the permitting, the Stream Bed Act, zoning, the ability for us to preserve access to private property, the road issues, that sort of thing. I mean, just take a big swing. And then I did have a question for Willis when Pat was done. Representative Curtin.
Thank you. Thank you. Pat O'Haron, I'm the Chief Planning Officer for Missoula County. First of all, I want to tell folks thank you for both contacting our office, contacting Mr. Curdy, and expressing your concern about these issues. The only way local government finds out about these things often is because people make a phone call and show up. So thank you very much for doing that. A couple of items, just so we're all familiar with what Missoula County can and can't do. We have no ability, and certainly the commissioners have no authority, to intervene in a sale of land between two private property owners. That just doesn't happen in Montana that way. Having said that, however, when we first became aware of the issue, we did contact the current owner, Plum Creek, and visited with their individual who oversees all of their land in North America, not just the U.S., but in North America. And as you may know, Plum Creek is one of the largest private landowners in the continental United States. So they were willing to take our phone call in large part because the county commissioners have built a relationship with these types of businesses, so we can make those phone calls when an issue comes up. Plum Creek has been very responsive, quite honestly, and provided us with what information they could. They also mentioned that they would be happy to work with Missoula County and others in the future. So I think there is some hope here that perhaps this access issue, if not on this one particular quarter section, but the area in general, is something that Plum Creek is interested in working through with area landowners and with other land trusts. The new landowner, as I understand it, or potential new landowner, best as I understand, the closing has not yet occurred, but is scheduled fairly soon. That landowner may actually be willing to allow some access through the property. So even that gate has not been totally closed, at least as far as Missoula County is aware. We looked through our subdivision records and could find no evidence of any conditions on subdivisions in the area that would have permitted long-term public access across this quarter section. It appears, at least from our record search, that access has been historic, it has been well used, but it has also been permitted by Plum Creek. Not opposed by Plum Creek, but permitted. And if they withdraw that permission, then technically our attorney's office tells us they can do that and public access is no longer permitted. So it's been a permissive access, not a prescriptive access in that sense of access in this particular area. Because of the nature of private transactions and the county's lack of ability to interfere in those sales, I think perhaps the best way forward is for landowners to get together, and perhaps it's Greg or it's Willis or others who want to organize some sort of group to get together to work with Five Valleys Land Trust, to work with the Rocky Mountain Foundation. Certainly Missoula County would be happy to work with you, and Plum Creek, to see if there is a long-term resolution here. But it really does have to come from you. The commissioners just don't have the authority to step in and do something like that. In terms of the lack of response from the planning department, Ms. Pierpoint, I apologize if that indeed was the case. You can call me directly. I will get you whatever information you need, and I will talk to staff who were unable to provide that and find out why they were unable to provide it. The area, as I understand it, does permit, and the growth policy in this area does allow for one residential unit per 40 acres,
But it's not zoned, right?
but it's correct, it's not zoned. There is a boundary line relocation or family transfer, that has been proposed for this area but has not been brought forward, and that wouldn't happen until there was actually a sale that occurred. The future landowner can't do a family transfer, obviously on land that doesn't belong to them. So what can be developed is one unit per 40 acres and all accessory uses to that. And those accessory uses in Missoula County can be very wide-ranging. So you should just be aware that that is a potential development here and on other Plum Creek lands as well. In terms of the Corps of Engineers and Conservation District permits and their requirements, I'm not aware of any. That doesn't mean that the landowners or Plum Creek haven't applied, but again, I will have staff research that and find out the answers to those questions. Were permits required? And if they were, have they been issued? And we will get copies of those permits and make them available to you if that's something you would like to see. In terms of the open space bond, and I appreciate that someone talked to Elizabeth on that issue. This area is within the jurisdiction of the countywide open space bond. It is within the city's $5 million allocation for that. So they would primarily be responsible for an open space bond application. Having said that, this is in one of those areas, as has been mentioned routinely, that's kind of the wildland-urban interface. It's an urban-forest interface, and there may be an opportunity for a joint city-county project. You should know, however, that Missoula County prefers to spend its dollars on easement acquisition, not land acquisition. That's because it's just too expensive to try to purchase land. So finding an easement, whether it's a trail easement of 40 feet or a conservation easement that covers the entire property, as Dr. Huckabee mentioned, that's something that Five Valleys Land Trust and the Elk Foundation, Missoula County, and the city of Missoula can certainly look into. Subdivision regulations and certificates of survey. There's a great deal of confusion all across Missoula County and in the city of Missoula about the difference between a division of land and a subdivision of land. Plum Creek can divide each of those sections that you see in pink up there into 160-acre tracts with no subdivision review. That's state law in Montana. They do not have to go through any sort of regulatory review other than some issues related to surveying requirements. So just be aware that and that's true for any private property owner. If they have a 160-acre parcel that they cut from a larger parcel, that's not going to be subject to subdivision review. There are other divisions of land that are also not subject to subdivision review, and that's a state regulation, and Willis can certainly help us address those in the next legislative session if there's enough desire across members of the public to do that. In terms of who's responsible and should be, who does Plum Creek have to answer to? Who does this new private property owner have to answer to? Quite honestly, there are very minimum regulations applicable here. We don't have road standards that apply outside of subdivision regulations on private roads. So steepness, type of material, Missoula County, again, just does not have any abilities to interject itself in that. So who's responsible? Ultimately, it's the private property owner who's responsible. It's not the public that deals with situations on 160-acre tracts and development. As to the intent of that road, Plum Creek tells me it was roughed in to give the property owner, the potential new property owner, some sense of what a road would look like if they built a home up there and where that road would go. Whether it's the final road, whether it's the road the new property owner wants, again, those are discussions between Plum Creek and this new property owner. Did that, Stacy, answer most of your questions? I had a list here, but I may have missed a few.
Exhaustively.
Sorry.
That's okay. No, it was a wonderful education. And the question I had for Willis, I think it's been answered, Willis. I just had a question about subdivision regs, and I think you answered that those subdivision regs are contained within Montana statute, not at the county level.
Yeah, that's true, Stacy. But one thing I'd like to make a couple comments about what Pat said. Okay, the original landowner out here, well, going back to my familiarity with the area, was Champion International. Champion owned the land. I can't remember the date of the transfer from Champion to Plum Creek. Okay, but you know, you talked about saying this has been permissive use and not prescriptive use. Well, Champion never had a problem with anybody going up there until some of the and that did not change until the Vanderveens and others purchased part of Champion's land, which was this little section right here. This, I don't know if you can call it a quarter section, but it's where Big Flat Road takes its first 90 degree to the second 90 degree and down here to the third turn. When that occurred, the Missoula Backcountry Horsemen, at that time my wife was the president, met with the lands manager for Champion International. And there was an agreement. Unfortunately, we cannot find the documentation, full documentation, between Champion and the Missoula Backcountry Horsemen. The person involved in that negotiation for Champion says that he offered an opportunity to the Missoula Backcountry Horsemen to buy a lease to that trail. And my wife astutely says, no, that wasn't part of the deal. It was just plain agreement to let trail use across that piece of property. So the use, again, if we want to go back to this prescriptive use thing, we can go way back beyond before the agreement between, or the whatever agreement was between the Missoula Backcountry Horsemen and Champion. So, you know, I do see some prescriptive easement issue here, not just a permissive use. But Pat, I do agree that the county doesn't need to buy the land. I don't think we're looking here, I don't, from my perspective, I don't know about everybody else here, perspective of buying the land, but we are definitely interested in an easement. Okay? Now, you know, to go beyond that, I currently sit on the legislature's interim or Environmental Quality Council interim committee. So we primarily have oversight on Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, Department of Natural Resources and Conservation, and Department of Environmental Quality. The 64th legislature passed House Joint Resolution, which deals primarily with public access onto public and private, or public access on public lands. Our interim committee has met twice now since the session, trying to get a handle on what we're going to do about public access onto public lands. You know, it's a really, really sticky issue. You know, and we're trying to work at a solution. I don't know how easy it's going to be to come by. But the point is that we would like to have some type of easement. Not only at this point, but making sure that easement is granted to public land throughout the Plum Creek area. So I guess, you know, for clarification purposes, it has become a big deal with me in dealing with access statewide, and to let something like this happen within my own backyard and with our own backyards is somewhat, well, it's personally a downer, okay? So again, just a little bit of clarification about a little history. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'd just like to add that we treat our regulations that apply to private property the same. It doesn't matter if you're Plum Creek and you own 22,000 acres or if you're somebody that owns 10 acres. I mean, we have to be consistent in that. We're not allowed to apply them differently here. And so an easement, when we talk about an easement, that's going to be a defined easement. It isn't going to be access to all that private land. I mean, if you were the owner of that, of the 5,000 acres that Mr. Huckabee talked about, or however many the other family has, it's their private property. So just understand that while we hear what you're saying and how people have enjoyed all this land, we aren't allowed to pick on the big guy in the room just because everybody likes that property. But and I think the best thing that you're doing is talking to the land trusts, whether it be the Elk Foundation and Pie Valley, because the open space project is really voluntary. And so we count on those land trusts to be the ones that are visiting with the folks that own the land and bring forward a project that makes sense, whether it's to protect habitat or give access or what other things that are met by our the open space bond that the people passed. So we do hear what you're saying. The only permit that the county would do here is if somebody gets if someone just does buy the property and wants to build a house, would be a building permit and any permits that go with that, and then the septic and well permits that would be in relation to that. The stream ones, and as you said, that there's the Corps of Engineers and the Conservation District. And sometimes they ask us for comments on them, but we're just a commenting agency. So thank you all for taking your time to come here today.
Is there any other public comment on items not on today's agenda? I want to thank you all for your interest and for coming, and we'll continue to utilize our existing relationships, and we're, as Pat mentioned, we're more than willing partners to work with people on this, to work with the public and Plum Creek, recognizing that we have to stay within a very limited scope of what our authority is. But certainly as a partner, we can continue this conversation and continue to see how we can move this forward to be amenable to all parties. So thank you very much for coming, and the world is ruled by those who show up. So thank you.
I would just add that in whatever way the county can help facilitate those conversations with Plum Creek, because we have those relationships, that I think everybody would be amenable to that, to help facilitate those conversations that you all want to have with the private landowner. And thank you. I would just like to reiterate, thank you for coming.
I'm sorry, I know it's totally closed right now, it's finished, but my name is Elisa Leash, and just for the record, really appreciated what you said, Gene. And my husband and I have had been meeting with Rocky Mountain Foundation and all those organizations, and there is all that huge land, and then there's key access points and key travel corridors, both for people and for wildlife. And we have sat down and identified those, and it's going to take a really creative situation. It's going to take some purchasing and some easements, but in all of that, like in that whole 22,000 acres, Martin Gulch is where everybody goes right now. It's like the key. It's a neighborhood trail, and if we lose that, it's gone. And we might lose it. I mean, we might just have to lose it. But I think it's really worth putting everything we have to it, because it's the first step, and it's going to determine what happens with, kind of one of the last best places in our wonderful county that we have. So just closing our, sorry, because I know we're done. But
Thank you. And is there any other public comment? All right, moving on to the current claims list from September 9th to October 13th, 2015. It is $5,097,479.43. And moving on to the hearings for certificates of survey, we have first, I will open the hearing for the Dale Denny family transfer, starting with a staff presentation.
Thank you, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Christine DeSenza with Community and Planning Services. And we have a consideration for a family transfer exemption affidavit submitted by Dale and Karen Denny. They own 21.4 acres in Frenchtown. A slightly closer view. Dale and Karen Denny propose to use the family transfer exemption to create and transfer 3 parcels to their parent and 2 adult children. So it would be 5.35 acres to parent Ed Denny, 5.35 acres to adult child Dustin Denny, and 5.35 acres to adult child Michael Denny, for use as home sites, and the remainder tract would also be 5.35 acres. The request for the site proposal is unzoned, and the land use recommendation is 1 dwelling per 40 acres in the open and resource land use designation from the 2002 Regional Land Use Guide. The proposal is compliant with zoning, because there is none. This parcel was created in 1978 when Tom Sheffer went through a division of land to create 15 parcels larger than 20 acres, as shown, slightly shown in this Certificate of Survey 1730. Private access is proposed to occur through a private easement through the middle of the property. There are no structures on the site currently, and it is outside the floodplain. This request was reviewed for subdivision evasion criteria found in the subdivision regulations and triggered to divide a tract that was created through use of an exemption, and there was that certificate of survey from 1978, more than 20 acres. So that created, I think, 15 parcels that are larger than 20 acres. And then it also triggered the criteria to divide a tract which will become one of 3 or more parcels that will have been divided from the original tract through use of exemptions. And so this proposal would create 4 total parcels from 1. But despite that, the staff is recommending approval, and we have a proposed motion. But before we get to that, I would ask Dale and Karen, or Dale, to approach the podium, and we'll go over the standard family transfer questions. And if you could state your name for the record, we'll do a little sharing.
Okay.
Here, Christy. Oh, thanks.
Dale Denny.
All right. So are you using the subdivision exemption process in an attempt to evade subdivision review?
No.
And how long have you owned the property?
Approximately 2.5 months.
And did you buy the property with the intent of dividing it?
Did not.
Do you or your transferees intend to transfer the property within the next year?
Probably not, no.
And have you talked to anyone at the county about going through subdivision review?
No.
Are you in the business of building or developing property?
No.
Do you understand that this exemption is not being reviewed for adequate physical and legal access by all vehicles in all weather? And do you understand that approval of this exemption does not mean the property is approved for zoning compliance, building permits, floodplain, or septic systems, or any other permits?
Yes.
And do you have a recipient present?
Yeah, my son, Michael's here.
Michael, okay. And we have a few questions for you, or you could answer them together. Do you have a oh wait, sorry. So you're not a minor. So will the property be developed that you're?
I would like to, eventually. I just started my career, so within like 3 to 5 years or so, I'd like to get a house going.
And do you know the intent of the other recipients?
Yes, my other son would like to, they own a property in Frenchtown, they would like to relocate there, so.
And you have a parent involved?
I do. My father's 76 years old, very independent, and at some point, if he needs assistance, like to be able to put him back there so we can help him. He can maintain a certain amount of independence.
Thank you. And two more. Will the recipients of the property be residing on the property?
Yes.
And where do the recipients live now?
I live here in Missoula in an apartment.
And you had one in Frenchtown?
Yes.
And where's your father? Sorry?
He's here, local in Missoula.
In Missoula. Okay, so those are all of my questions. The commissioners may have more.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And is there any public comments on the family transfer? All right. Seeing none, I will close the hearing. Entertain a motion.
I would move that we approve the request from the Dennings to create 3 additional parcels.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor? Aye. Motion passes.
And you, we aren't insulted if you need to leave.
Yes, it's been a long one.
I promised them an hour.
Thank you.
Next, I will open the hearing for the Patricia Iverson family transfer.
You can stay seated. I'll work for my presentation.
Oh, here, you can have this back. I can,
We can
yeah.
share.
Okay. Okay, so this is a family transfer. For the record, my name is Christine DeCenzo with Community and Planning Services, and this is a consideration for family transfer exemption submitted by Patricia Iverson. She owns 6.1 acres in East Missoula. Patricia proposes to use the family transfer exemption to create, and transfer 1 parcel to her spouse. Here's that proposed division. 4.1 acres to spouse Randy Iverson for use as a home site, and the remainder tract would be 2 acres. The zoning, the proposal is compliant with zoning, which is CRR3 with a density of 4 dwellings per acre, and the proposal is compliant. For parcel history, this parcel was created in 1992 through a family transfer by Johnny Morton, and that was coupled with an occasional sale at the same time, and that created tract 4C as the remainder. And that is included in COS 4146. Tract 4 was created in 1971 prior to the 1973 Subdivision and Platting Act. The original owner, or not the original, but previous ownership was recently transferred from both Patricia and Randy Iverson to solely Patricia Iverson through a quitclaim in August of this year. As for access structures and floodplain, it would be accessed through Renaissance Drive. And there is 1 existing dwelling and 2 outbuildings on the property, which were built in 2011, and another was built in 1985. It is located outside the floodplain, which you can see in this photo in the red here. It was reviewed for evasion criteria and triggered 2. First, to divide a tract that was created through use of an exemption, and it had that family transfer back in 1992, and then also to divide land for transfer to a spouse, and so that does apply in this case, although that is a recognized relationship within state law available for family transfers. And so the staff recommendation is for approval. It does not appear to be evading subdivision, and I have a recommended motion, but before we get to that, now's question time. And these are the standard family transfer questions. And could you state your name for the record?
Patricia Iverson.
Thank you. And are you using the subdivision exemption process in an attempt to evade subdivision review?
No.
How long have you owned the property?
It'll be 20 years in March 2016.
And did you buy the property with the intent of dividing it?
No.
Do you or your transferees intend to transfer the property within the next year?
No.
Have you talked to anyone at the county about going through subdivision review?
No.
Are you in the business of building or developing property?
No.
And do you understand that this exemption is not being reviewed for adequate physical and legal access by all vehicles in all weather?
Yes.
And do you understand that approval of this exemption does not mean the property is approved for zoning compliance, building permits, floodplain or septic systems, or any other permits?
Yes.
And I believe the recipient is here as well, so we could both answer these. And could you state your name for the record too, actually?
Randy Iverson.
Thank you. Will the property be developed?
At some point in time, we are planning on building a retirement home on it.
Thank you. And so, will the recipient of the property be residing on the property?
Yes.
And where do you live now?
Currently at 1480 Renaissance.
Okay, thank you. Those are all of my questions. The commissioners may have more for you.
I just have one, because the drawings aren't very clear as to, so this funny shape is the shape of the lot, right? This one says Randy's piece and Patricia's piece, but I don't see the line very clearly. Okay, there.
It's a little bolder. It's a little bolder on the slide. There's an orange line in the proposal. I think it's dashed.
This is the actual property as it exists right now. And what we're going to plan on doing is probably coming across here, and the house that we live in here will stay with the existing property, and then we will be building a new home out here in the future.
Did that print black and white? Was that okay?
Yeah,
Sorry
so
about that.
Yeah, the line doesn't show up. That was my only question, although the state law does allow you to transfer, but I always tease and ask if somebody's in the doghouse or something. Looks like all the houses are staying with her lots, you don't get one. Okay.
No.
Any other comments or questions? Is there any public comment on the Patricia Iverson family transfer? Seeing none, I will close the hearing.
I would move that the Board of County Commissioners approve the request by Patricia Iverson to create and transfer one additional parcel by use of family transfer exemption based on the fact that it does not appear to be an attempt to evade subdivision review.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the hearings for annexation of property in the Missoula Rural Fire District. Start by opening the hearing for Guy and Sharon Bingham.
Hello, for the record, I'm Tyler Gurnant, I'm the Missoula County Clerk and Treasurer. We have 3 petitions here today. The first one is Guy and Sharon Bingham. So I will get to the fun part. A petition has been received by the Clerk and Recorder's Office to annex a parcel of land located in Missoula County into the Missoula Rural Fire District. The petition has been checked and verified. It contains the signatures of 40% or more of the owners of the real property within the proposed area to be annexed and of the owners of the property representing 40% or more of the taxable value of the property within the proposed area to be annexed, thereby meeting the requirements of Montana Code Annotated Section 7-33-2125 for annexation of adjacent territory. The area to be annexed is described as follows. Tract A1 of Certificate of Survey 5183 located in the west half of Section 21, Township 14 North, Range 19 West, Principal Meridian, Montana, Missoula County, Montana, parcel number 3095401, commonly known as 9214 Keegan Trail, Missoula, Montana. The petition has been paid in full, and the notice of a hearing was published twice in the approved newspaper on October 4th and October 11th. I don't see that 40% or more of the affected landowners are here to object to the petition. So by state law, you are required to approve it. Nonetheless, I would ask for a motion approving the petition.
think the other thing that the record should reflect is that the Missoula Rural Fire District has approved the annexation, so their board has considered it and are willing to accept them. So we always think that's an important piece.
And although there's not many people here, is there any public comment? Seeing none, I close the hearing. Can I get a motion?
I just had a quick question. Where is the property?
Grant Creek.
Yeah. Keating Trail. Actually, not terribly familiar with where the property is.
Oh.
It's quite a ways up, right?
It's not very zoomed out on our map.
So what we find, Stacy, just for a little background, is sometimes the fire department is working hard to identify properties that haven't technically been, through subdivision or something, they should have been annexed into the fire district, but there are some that are missing, and so we're making sure that they're included. One, for protection, I mean, not that the fire department will never let them burn down. The other is so that they can contribute to the fire district's budget on their tax bill. And so this one looks like it's close to grant land, so, that's not too far up, I guess.
I would move that the commissioners approve the petition to annex 9214 Keegan Trail into the Missoula Rural Fire District.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next up, I'll open the hearing for Burt Green Comb.
Again,
Looks like there's 3 families, maybe?
correct.
Oh, okay.
Again, for the record, I'm Tyler Gurnant, the Missoula County Clerk and Treasurer. And a petition has been received by the Clerk and Recorder's Office to annex a parcel of land located in Missoula County into the Missoula Rural Fire District, which has been approved by the Missoula Rural Fire District. The petition has been checked and verified. It contains the signatures of 40% or more of the owners of real property within the proposed area to be annexed and of owners representing 40% or more of the taxable value of the property within the proposed area to be annexed, thereby meeting the requirements of Montana Code Annotated Section 7-33-2125 for annexation of adjacent territory. The area to be annexed is described as follows: a tract of land located in Government Lot 4 in the northwest quarter of Section 2, Township 13 North, Range 19 West, Principal Meridian, Montana, Missoula County, Montana, more particularly described as Parcel A of Certificate of Survey number 2507, parcel number 5840460, commonly known as 5828 Black Fox Trail in Missoula, Montana. The petition has been paid in full, and a notice of the hearing has been published twice in an approved newspaper on October 4th and October 11th. So at this time, if there are any questions, I suppose commissioners have.
Any questions, comments?
So this one is just one property, but it has 3
That's
owners.
correct, one property with 3 owners.
And again, it's been accepted by the
Missoula Rural Fire District.
Okay, so the letter in here they considered too, but the Missoula Rural Fire District has accepted.
That's correct.
Commissioner Oct?
So the Rural Fire District identifies parcels that haven't been annexed into their district. Could the property owners protest being annexed into their district?
Yes, they
The rural
could. They
fire
actually
district?
have to be the ones to petition, so they have to 40% or more. Traditionally, the idea is that there would be large groups of landowners coming together to petition to be annexed in, but more accurately, I suppose, it usually is just one landowner.
Does the fire district ask people to
I think-
to be included?
I think they're being proactive in trying to identify parcels that have been missed over time.
And the statute, in these situations, basically, the statute requires that 40% or more approve it, but then if 40% or more object to it, then there's really not really any leeway for you guys. If 40% or more object, you can't approve it, and if 40% or more approve, then you have to approve it. So
And in reality, this is going to reduce their fire insurance.
yeah, usually is why they do it.
And as you can see from this aerial photo, we hope they have protection because they're in the forest.
Yeah. And is there any public comment on the Black Fox Trail annexation? Seeing none, I close the hearing. Can I get a motion?
I would move that the Board of County Commissioners accept the petition for annexation into Missoula Rural Fire District for the parcel located at 5828 Black Fox Trail, Missoula, Montana.
Second. All in favor? Passes. And lastly, I'll open the hearing for Douglas and Janet Stewart.
And I apologize, this one has a very long legal description.
We have the legal description written if you want to just use the address. Does it have an address?
I think I'm supposed to read the legal
Okay.
description into the record. Sorry. I don't want to do it any more than you want to hear it.
Okay. It's fun to listen to you.
Yeah. Again, for the record, Tyler Gurnett, Missoula County Clerk and Treasurer. And a petition has been received by the Clerk and Recorder's Office to annex a parcel of land located in Missoula County into the Missoula Rural Fire District. The petition has been checked and verified. It contains the signatures of 40% or more of the owners of real property within the proposed area to be annexed and of the owners of property representing 40% or more of the taxable value of the property within the proposed area to be annexed, thereby meeting the requirements of Montana Code Annotated Section 7-33-2125 for annexation of adjacent territory. The area to be annexed is described as follows. A tract of land being a portion of Government Lot 6, Section 6, Township 12 North, Range 18 West, Principal Meridian, Montana, Missoula County, Montana, more particularly described as follows, beginning at the southeast corner of Government Lot 6, Section 6, Township 12 North, Range 18 West, Principal Meridian, Montana, thence along the southerly boundary of said Lot 6, north 89 degrees, 33 minutes, 34 seconds west, 433.17 feet to a point on the easterly boundary of the Fort Missoula Timber Reserve, thence for the next two courses along said easterly boundary north 14 degrees 26 minutes 13 seconds west 733.71 feet, thence north 14 degrees 0 minutes 0 seconds west 562.52 feet, thence south 89 degrees 22 minutes 42 seconds east 753.68 feet to a point on the easterly boundary of said Government Lot 6, thence along said easterly boundary south 0 degrees 04 minutes 2 seconds west 1,251.5 feet to the point of beginning, parcel number 5829251, commonly known as 4283 Deer Creek Road, Missoula, Montana. The Missoula Rural Fire District has approved and accepted this petition, and the notice of hearing has been published twice in an approved newspaper on October 4th and October 11th. Are there any questions? Would you like me to read that again?
I didn't catch the legal description.
Yeah, are you sure you got all the minutes and seconds?
Questions or comments from either of you?
You just like the word fence.
Yeah.
I love those, and there are 2 fours, notwithstandings.
And is there any public comment on the Deer Creek Road annexation? Seeing none, I close the hearing.
I would move that the Board of County Commissioners approves a petition to annex a parcel of land into the Missoula Rural Fire District, commonly known as 4283 Deer Creek Road, Missoula, Montana.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Is there any other business to be brought before the board at this time? Seeing none, we are in recess. Thank you.